Well, here we go. We're going to talk about jigs. That's right. And the reason we're going to talk about jigs is most people don't have a real good understanding of them. They take them out of the package. They throw whatever trailer on it. Sometimes they catch fish. Most of the time they don't. And they say, jigs aren't that good. Well, to catch fish on a jig, you need to understand them. Now, we're going to talk about jigs in several categories. Okay? We have teeny little micro jigs. Okay? We have casting jigs. Notice the size of the hook. Then we have pitching and flipping jigs. Notice that this hook is much larger than this hook. And we have swim jigs, but that'll be in part 2 of the video. Today we're going to talk about casting and flipping jigs. We're going to talk about the trailers to use and the sizes of the jigs and how that trailer really affects whether you're actually going to catch anything or not. Okay. First of all, jigs. We go back to the casting jig. Light wire hook. 12 to about 15 pound test line. And you do what it implies. You cast it out and then you work it. Now, because it's a casting jig, the rate of fall is not nearly as important as a flipping and pitching jig. So when it comes to picking a trailer, you want to pick a trailer of one of 3 different categories. Pretty much a dead action, something that has a medium amount of action, like a packer crawl, or something with a lot of action, like this rage crawl. To me, the warmer the water, the more action I want. So early in the spring, I'll tend to go with something with a dead action. When the fish are in pre-spawn, maybe medium action. And then something with a lot of action after the spawn. Also, the rate of retrieve will dictate whether you want something in the way of more action. As in if you're popping it up off the bottom, if you're steady reeling it. Also, watercolor has a lot to do with it. You see, the dirtier the water, the more likely you'll want a little more action in your jig. Now, we've got another category of jigs. Your flipping and pitching jigs. Here's where it gets really simple and really complicated at the same time. A lot of flipping and pitching bites comes on the fall of the jig. So the weight of the jig is very important, but the trailer is also more important. And I want you to think about it like you're swimming. That's right, swimming. You throw a jig out with this dead trailer, which means you jump in the water and you don't do anything. And you just sink to the bottom. The fact that this is a dead action trailer means that it doesn't fight the weight of the jig so much. So you retain a lot of the speed of the jig sinking. Now, you take this rage crawl. Which one's going to sink faster? Well, think about the rage crawl as you swimming. You throw that jig in the water and now the arms are going. You're fighting the jig on the way down. So, if you want to keep the same fall rate between the 2 jigs, you'll need to go one size heavier, at least, if you're going with a chunk like the rage crawl. Okay, there's speed. Next is these things have weed guards on them. And weed guards are fish guards. That's right. It makes you need to set the hook harder, But there are things that you can look at in a particular jig in the way of modifications. Let's take this casting jig. Notice how far the weed guard is from the tip of the jig hook. What I'll do is I'll take and I'll thin this weed guard out. I'll cut a few strands off of it, and then what I'll do is I'll push the weed guard down a good bunch of times. And what that'll do is that'll cause your weed guard to be closer to the tip of the hook. So you don't have to drive the weed guard completely down before the fish is actually hooked. Now, you could shorten the weed guard, but you have to remember, if you're taking the same amount of strands and shortening them, you're making the weed guard stiffer. That's right, stiffer. So that's why I don't always cut them down. Now, if you take this pitching jig, okay, you'll notice that right out of the box, this jig has a weed guard much closer to it. And if you feel the weed guard, it's a little bit stiff. So if the weed guard is already naturally close to the hook, then I'll take and trim it. And it's an easy trim, and I don't trim it right to the point of the hook, okay? I'm going to take this weed guard I'm only going to take about that much of it off. Because remember, it gets a little stiffer, and I cut it at an angle. So you have a weed guard that's going to hook the fish almost immediately. Now here's another trick. If you're thinning out the weed guard on a jig, I want you to thin it out from the top. Okay, so if you're going to thin it out from the top, cut it close to the head. Why is that? Well, if you thin it from underneath, where you cut is going to support the bristles and make it stiffer again. It's going to stop you from catching fish. Now, here's something that we don't talk about all the time, okay? If you're fishing open water, if I'm fishing a long tapering point, maybe has a couple of rocks on it, it's gravel and stuff like that, you know there's nothing against the law, okay, taking this casting jig and cutting the weed guard completely off. That's right, just cut it off. No weed guard at all. Fish still eat it, they still hold on to it, and you'll hook a lot more fish. So, what are my recommendations for jigs? Well, let's talk about casting jigs. I basically like two sizes. I like something light around 5/16 of an ounce for shallow water, and then something around a 1/2 ounce for a little bit deeper water. For flipping and pitching, except for grass, okay? Except for grass. I like something in the 3/8 to 1/2 ounce range. Now, if we're going to flip grass, you're probably looking at something around a 3/4 ounce range. And if you're going to look at a micro jig, there's nothing wrong at all with this little tiny 1/8 ounce ball head that I put a really sparse skirt on, and this little teeny Yamamoto crawl. You throw this on 6 to 10 pound line on a spinning rod, you will get a lot of bites. If you're looking for bites, a micro jig is really the way to go. And you'll notice no weed guard. So, what are we going to talk about next time? Well, next time we're going to talk about skirt colors, trailer colors, and swim jigs. So, till next time, I'm Steve.